I came back to a very, very sick body, and I was hooked up to a ventilator and working through learning myself again and learning to walk again after I got off the ventilator, learning how to eat again, and just like learning this thing that is my body. And in doing so, I realized like what a doorway it is to spirituality that we have in this flesh. And that's what the body really is. It's just a story for us to continue to remember who we truly are.
Today we have Melinda Peterson again. Before I go ahead and read her bio, just for those of you who have yet to watch it, she is a returning champion, meaning this is her second time on the show. She was with us first on August 20th, and that was season 5, episode 11. So that is when she dives into her miraculous NDE, which very much informs the conversation today. So I recommend all that can and will, please do listen. And let me just dive in and share the bio for Melinda Peterson. Melinda is a health intuitive, registered nurse, speaker, and yoga guide. She survived a near death experience from a fatal pregnancy complication. On the other side, she parted lovingly with her baby son, Oak, only for their souls to be deeply interwoven forever. During her NDE, it was revealed that she was to return to the human experience to share about the incredible wisdom of having a body. Slowly climbing back from less than 1% survival revealed even more profound knowledge, and she combined that with physical concept learned while becoming a nurse. In tune with Melinda, her business helps women move through past beliefs and reconnect to their unique body's wisdom, melding science, organ consciousness, and seasonal intuition. Welcome back.
Thank you. I am so honored to be back and so happy to see you again, Kristin, and get to connect with Bernadette in this way,
Mhm.
while connecting with Bernadette in all sorts of ways. So
Yes.
I am just so honored to be back, and I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, we appreciate that you came back. I will say for me, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, and perhaps this is the launching off place. When we're exploring these ideas of spirituality, at least for me, it can feel kind of tempting to bypass the body because the body is where
Right.
pain and trauma and difficulty, especially as we age or if someone is battling any number of illnesses or diseases. But there's a reason for the body, and it's not to bypass it, and it holds wisdom. Can you
Mhm.
start to open up that conversation, and then perhaps we can dive more into things like the organs and seasonal intuition and things of that nature?
Absolutely. When I was awoken to this information that the wisdom is in the body on the other side, I really didn't know what that meant. As you shared in my bio, I came back to a very, very sick body, and I was hooked up to a ventilator and working through learning myself again and learning to walk again after I got off the ventilator, learning how to eat again, and just like learning this thing that is my body. And in doing so, I realized like what a doorway it is to spirituality that we have in this flesh. And that's what the body really is. It's just a story for us to continue to remember who we truly are. And it's a way for us to bond with our spirituality, both in practice, but also just in the understanding of where we've been through our ancestors. And then also where we're going through the aging process if we are so fortunate to get there. And so, this idea of feeling a desire to bypass the body is completely relevant because it's so unknown to us and to our spirits and
Mhm.
it's unexpected, right? It's vulnerable and it can be painful at times. And through that, though, is some of the most utmost wisdom and some of the most spirit led and heart filled practices that we can start to build in relationship to ourselves.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. What comes up for me, just even in that opening is, I was just sharing with you that I was, writing this book. I was going back to the time when I was little, and I was, um, recognizing that there was a spirit inside of my body, that I was that the the it was my spirit that was looking out and seeing, and it was the first time I ever made that connection. And then it kind of went away, that, and it is just, it has been coming back to me, this deep connection, how spiritual the body is, along with our spirit that is inside it.
Mhm. Yes, it's really for us to learn even more about ourselves. And there's just so many ways, which kind of lends itself into this idea of organ consciousness, which I know we'll also talk about. But there's so many ways that specific parts of ourselves and parts of our body can give us messages. Um, and especially like when we have the ability and the information and the transformation to help us like become a deeper witness for our body, as you shared, Bernadette. That's just like that's the key right there. It's to start to say, okay, and
Mhm.
hold presence for it and go, where am I feeling that? And that was what I was like thinking, where were you feeling that? Where did that show up for you? What parts of your body? And that can start to unlock the pathway forward for what the knowing is and for you to go deeper in that
Hmm.
knowing.
This brings up so much for me when I think about my own personal work as well as the work that I do with clients when I'm teaching them emotional regulation or to
Mhm.
update some narratives, that the beliefs are stored often in the body. When you are believing that, where do you feel that? And so
Mhm.
there's so many, like there's yoga, there's breath work, there's tuning into the body, there's the etheric body, there are the chakras. What is a and then there's I know this is really a convoluted question because then there's so much pleasure and then there's so much pain and there's so much escaping and um, so much opportunity to treat our bodies poorly in terms of our belief about our bodies, our perception of our bodies. What is a starting place? Because I'm sure
Mhm.
as people listen, they have so many different relationships to being in a body.
I love that you asked this question, Kristen, because this really gets to the heart of why, right? Why do we feel so disconnected from our body and why do we want to other it?
Yes.
And a lot of that is because we have these stories, we don't really understand it. We have a very poor, like on the practical side, why we make poor choices, and it's not really necessarily even our fault, poor choices for food or nutrition or whatever. There's so much power in keeping us separate from our bodies. And so reconnecting to the body is like it's actually a revolution for ourselves and for our society as a collective because of that, right? Like the story that we start to enter into from a very young age is that your body is separate. Your body's supposed to look a certain way. It's supposed to eat, this type of food. It's supposed to act a certain way. It's supposed to, and then we internalize those messages and that becomes those little T traumas, right? That then we figure why. It's always something we're fighting against. It's always something that we need to change. I don't want to connect to this thing that I'm always fighting against and I always want to change. It's hard and I just don't like it, frankly, right? And that becomes that internalized message for so many of us. And myself, I had it through most of my waking life and I still work with it every day. And there's like still that part of me that's like, you know, criticizes or judges in some way. And so much of this is like outside of our control and is created on purpose for us not to be truly ourselves, right?
Mm,
And for us not to show up in the ways that we want to show up. So this process of like getting into and reconnecting into our bodies as a wisdom, as a teacher, it can be very challenging because you're battling against that. And those are very strong forces. And, um, and at the same time, the more that you know, as you start to discover, the more you start making better decisions for yourself, the more you start feeling more energetic, the more you start, and you're not even necessarily following some plan or it just comes from this inherent knowing. It's like we are set up this way. It's within us. Like we're designed to, crave certain foods based on what we're depleted in. We're designed to, and seasonality, right? We're designed to just like know what to grow for what season, right? Like it's very, very innate. And yet, um, we as a society have constructed so much story to other ourselves away from our body that prevent us from getting there. And so it's breaking down those barriers and working within yourself in the ways that are safe for you to get there. Um,
What is a safe way? For an example, and everyone has to find their own way.
yeah,
What is a safe way?
right. Absolutely. You know, for me, it was really yoga, and yoga was something I found before I had my NDE. And actually, it was one of the things that the doctor said helped me survive something as unsurvivable as it was, because my blood actually was able to oxygenate more, and so I actually was able to my organs were receiving more oxygen even when my body was low on blood. And yeah, and they say that your yoga practice, right? You had a yoga practice. And I said, yes. And the doctor said, I really think that had a lot to do with the fact that you survived.
Yeah.
And yoga and its practice is to union, right? To yoke. It's to bring together body, mind, and spirit. And so that is a practice that some people start with. It's not for everybody. And I will say too, kind of a right, if you will, to get there in a short period of time. And to really just get back to the breath. It's always about getting back to the breath or sound, sound and
Mhm.
vibration.
Mm,
Um, because our nervous system is one of the most basic ancestral
mm,
um, pieces of ourself. And so both breath and sound healing, sound purposeful, or just even just like having your own sound bowl, whatever that looks like, or changing like up a song that really moves you, something like that. That can really those two are quick hacks to get back into your body really, really easily and get into a nervous system state.
mhm.
Or also to take a little practice, right? Just to know what that is for you. But I found those to be great too when I'm on the go and just, feeling very unsettled.
Mm,
But yeah, as you mentioned, Kristen, too, breath work are some ways, therapeutic practices, working with a coach or an intuitive health practitioner like me, or but there's so many out there, and I do think that it's important too that we hold space for like where that where that story has shown up for us, whether through big T trauma or little T trauma, and have a guide who can handle that, hold that safely, and also like somebody who kind of can help you look at the possibility as well. And you can do that through yoga, you can do that through breath work. And there's been some, or visioning or meditation, right? There's other ways too to get there. And having, I believe too, just learning more about, on a very like basic level, which is something that we do every day, is nutrition, right? Learning more about the ways that certain foods show up and feel in our bodies can
yeah,
tell us a lot about who we are. And we don't need to eat the same thing every day, or we don't need to eat what our partner's eating, or we don't need to eat what our kids eating, right? we can really truly find what resonates within us. And when you feel it, you know it's working because there's like this cellular, ah, like this feeling of just like spark, right? And you just feel good. You feel full and satiated, but you feel energetic and good.
Yes.
What what it's making me think about is the times in my life when I have integrated my body with spirit, but um, because as you're talking about that, I remember those moments where I feel that, but it makes me realize that it wasn't a conscious thing that I was doing. I mean, even in just what you've started to share, I'm realizing that I haven't been integrating the two, my spirit. I've spent so much work on my spirit side and understanding who I am as a spiritual being and how I came into this body. But I've been focusing on the spirit that's inside it and kind of, the body's just there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's, it's funny. As much as I know about you, that's the first time that has really come into me. Yeah, yeah,
I'm so mm,
yeah.
Yeah. Such a powerful awareness. It's those moments. The language you use, Melinda, is so interesting. You say, in order to get there,
mm.
it's really concrete. What is there?
There is what it means for you in the day, in the hour, in the minute, right? And it's not, it is a practice, it is a journey. Our bodies are changing, and that's part of the process, right? If we are so fortunate to experience it. And I love that you mentioned that particularly because sometimes it can sound like it's a final, like it's some kind of a destination, right? And it is when I use it, it might sound that way a little bit, but I think to me there is like you could add present, right? To get like there would be also just to like feel a little more settled in the minute, in the day, in the hour, and
Yeah.
then it could change again, right? And so
Yeah. I mean, perhaps the replacing, and it's not to, be pedantic about your language. I just think it's always like an invitation to explore deeper. But perhaps it's saying instead of get there, get here. Here's whatever
mm,
you are, but
yes,
be embodied and
yeah,
grounded.
mm,
Yeah. Can
love
you
that.
can you speak a little bit more to, and I don't want to cut you off, Bernadette.
It's okay. Yeah.
Um, what is organ consciousness? I'm so curious.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So there's so many ways that we experience consciousness through our minds, right? Like we have cognitive conscious awareness, we have spiritual awareness, and we have dream states, right? When I started down my journey of learning myself again and coming into my body and getting here, I also, decided to, once I was more here in a place where I could go into nursing school. I went to nursing school, and when I was working in the hospital, I started to notice that I almost like a mediumship. It kind of is. It's like it was a way for mediumship to arrive was through the organs of the very patients that I was taking care of. So if let's just say I had like a really profound moment with a patient who had severe liver failure, and I I had a moment there where I was like setting up his medication and doing all of the things, and the liver was just saying, like, crying. It almost sounded like a little child, and like it just was like, I don't want to feel angry anymore. I don't want to hear anger anymore. And anger is like one emotion that can be in the liver centered area. And um So I sat with the patient for a minute and just said, what's it been like for you? And sort of opening up some curiosity questions. And it turned out that like he was sharing things with me that he hadn't shared with anybody in years. And he just like and then through the 3 days I was taking care of him, his numbers started improving. I don't know what happened actually, like, after that because he was still in the hospital, but I do know that, like, just that very like, being able to hold space for that organ consciousness and hearing that voice, like, through this, sick part of his body that was just, like and I started noticing that in other patients as well, and I thought to myself, there's a consciousness to the body. There's also a consciousness to each organ and to each system that we have, right? And they all have something to tell us in different ways. And it's the consciousness piece of it does show up as like almost like a mediumship where in another example, I was doing a reading for a client and, I said, "Has your skin been dry? What's going on with your skin? Have you been out in the sun a lot? There's something that the skin is trying to tell me."
Mm.
And the skin was, you know, it was a it was saying sun. It just kept saying sun, and I was like, "Are you going on a beach vacation? What let's unpack this a little bit." Um, and we got further along in the reading, and she said, "Well, I just lost my dog, and his name was Sunny." And so the skin was just like that portal for me to start to unravel
Hmm.
Sunny to come forward, right? And
Wow.
so we can do that through the very organs of our body, right? It's just another portal for consciousness.
Wow.
Do you
That
find it
just
God, I'm cutting you off,
I was
Bernadette.
just gonna say that
Nope.
just took it to a different level for me, like a different understanding, um, because it wasn't about the skin but the skin was speaking to you, which is amazing to it is a mediumship, like it is this incredible and yeah, I just want to hear more. So I'm going to stop myself from going on.
Yeah. Well, do you find, like you said, the liver tends to hold anger? You find that particular emotions are associated? And obviously you do. Which emotions are associated with which organs have you started to discover?
Yeah. Yeah, and they can be I love this question, Kristen, because they can also be when we think about emotions, we think about some of the more challenging ones or right, like sadness or anger. They can also be like really great playful places as well.
Good.
And it if you study the chakra system, it does really well align with the chakras. If you find that any of the chakras along the system be, because of the so the vagus nerve, right, which is the big nervous, the big na excuse me,
The
big
10th
nerve
cranial nerve, right?
thank you, the 10th cranial nerve or, like, the largest nerve of our system, the nervous system is what I was trying to say, innervates all of the organs in our body, and it also aligns with the chakras as well, so you can overlay, like, the vagus nerve and the chakra systems, and we know that we have chakra systems all over our bodies too, so the vagus nerve is sort of that portal between I like to say it's the portal between the body and the other side because it's allowing like us to really be in touch with the ethereal wisdom, right? That's here for us. Our ancestors, our spirit guides. It holds a lot of wisdom. So when you travel down the vagus nerve and you look at the different areas, it can hold like both and, right? Because the vagus nerve can also switch and be in like a state of flight,
Yes.
flight. Excuse me, I'm not finding words today. Um, or in a state of rest and pause. So so that's just to say like a little primer on that we can hold all sorts of emotions in this. And like the one of the places like which is really like seasonal right now for it being February and even moving into March is the blood and circulation. And blood and circulation shows up a lot more this time of year. We pay a lot more attention to it. It's also interesting that we have, it's heart centered, right? And we're thinking about Valentine's Day and like just in general, like warmth and movement and starting to feel like a little bit of like springtime pop in and still, yet still in the winter. Circulation shows up and circulation's a storyteller. And so
Mm.
circulation is a spiritual storyteller. It's a storyteller of the present, and the emotion that it holds is really a lot of different emotions. But the main thing that I want to say about circulation in general is that it can be very cleansing, and it can be very um, it is a way to hold higher consciousness our um, in our everyday selves. So, like, if I'll give a more practical example. So, if you were to, and this is kind of like on the medical side as well, if you were to get your lab results, for example, like say you're going to go very practical and you were to get your lab results and you were to look at your lab results and say, okay, everything looks normal, right? And okay, that's great. So I have some information, and yet what I really urge folks to also look at the details and to explore like what are different parts of that, and where am I curious to learn more. And then as you say, okay, so my red blood cells are showing up as like, kind of on the higher end of normal, but what is that trying to tell me? So then you can open up to, okay, well, red blood cells carry oxygen. And so there's this need for like me to learn something, to inhale, to bring something within, brings that could be community, that could be a class, that could be a workshop. That's like, I'm really, and that's gonna then offer you that like wisdom and that information for your cells in your body, but then also for your spirit and your consciousness. And it's going to bring you forward on your journey. And that's like one way, like one organ that's really showing up present for me. The pineal gland is one that I like to talk about a lot because that's where our third eye sits. Right? And it's responsible for our rhythms, right? In and our day-to-day rhythms, sleep and night and wake. And it's it's one of these, it sits, in your brain, or behind your eyes, really. I mean, where your third eye sits, behind your forehead side. And when the pineal gland shows up, it shows up in these cycles, and it can be trying to tell us something. So when we wake up suddenly, right? Or we're having patterns of needing to really find some more time for rest, that could be an emotion that's showing up. And that emotion could like a yearning. Right? There's a yearning. If you're feeling tired, if you're waking up in the middle of the night, it could be an alert. It could be something you need to pay attention to something, right? And that emotion could be surprise. It could be curiosity. It could be, um, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it just, yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask about, you talked about the ancestral part of it, and
Mhm.
what we're holding. And what spirit tells me, we know what can be passed down as far as what comes through our DNA. And we've talked about how traumas and things like that can be passed down into our bodies. But spirit also says that past lives can be a part of this as well. And so what would you say about those two, the ancestral things that our body is holding, and um, what just comes up for you for that?
I love this
Yeah.
question. Ancestry is really contained in our hands, right?
Mhm.
And if you look at the actual outline of your hand, it could look like your mother or your father, right? Or it could look like your grandmother, right? That's a place where we connect to our ancestry. It's really through our hands. And our hands, like the actual image of how our hands shaped genetically is passed down through. I mean, it's one of those things that says I am, right, part of this ancestry. This could be my great grandmother's hands or my great grandmother's hands, right? Um, and so that is the way. Those are like this is where we carry our ancestry in our hands. And you can tell, like, I would love to hear about in your readings, like when you're opening up to ancestry, if there's a tendency for folks to kind of start to open their hands like this, or if they start to like close them off like in fists, depending on if they're feeling a little more closed off or if they're feeling like, oh, there's actually this physical opening, right? That you start to see in their hands. It's like, I am
Mhm.
allowing it to be, right?
I often use my hands like exactly like that when I am working with somebody, because that is um, yeah, that is how they communicate. They will communicate that way. They to the, whoever I'm talking to, that the ancestors will use my hands as a
Mhm.
way to share so that they can visually see what, kind of what is going on. But yeah. And what about do you feel that same way with past lives? Do you feel that sense as
Yeah.
well?
It's interesting. So past lives, um, I I think that in a past life, we opt, and what I understand from what I was told with my spirit guides, is we opt to enter into certain bodies, or we opt to just kind of see what happens, right? And like work with the body that we're given. And we have a choice as spirits. And I think that that's like super, super cool and fascinating because I think that there are some kiddos in general who or people who come into early in life and they just feel very disembodied, right? And they feel like this doesn't feel like home. It's not, and I still just feel very like disconnected. And that's even outside of the whole society influence, right? It just feels like naturally like this body isn't isn't exactly expressed in the way that my spirit is expressing. But then that spirit's journey is to really learn how to work with that, right? And how to, and I think for me, one of the ways that I really see this expressed is through trans individuals. And I just think that is where spirit is really lending itself. That's those individuals are so higher purpose because they are, I believe, those spirits that just like chose to get a body, and it might not even be the body that's expressed as their spirit, and they're still moving forward in this life and making choices and loving themselves in the way that they are, and through that expression of gender and what that means for them. And I
Mhm.
think that yeah, I think that would be one example, of, yeah, of people that might
Yeah.
make that case.
So there's so many examples of that. I just want to, you've said so many profound things. So I want to just kind of demark where we are and then move to the trans individuals who've chosen these paths. Um,
Mhm.
what I heard you saying was that whatever system of the body, organ of the body, each one of them has a function. And within that function, if there is some sort of disease, disorder, or curiosity or sensation, that it's an opportunity to pause and say, well, the circulatory system is about oxygen saturation. Where are you needing more inspiration? Maybe
Mhm.
the lymphatics, it's about circulation and detox. Where are you holding emotion? So,
Yes,
seeing the metaphor in the literal functionality as an invitation to tune in and give your mind, body, and soul what it is asking for.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And oh,
Please.
okay. And one of the biggest systems that we live with every day is our digestive system. And our digestive system tells us all sorts of things, right? Depending on kind of the location. But really, it holds a lot of anxiety. It can hold, especially in the stomach, small intestine, and it can also hold a lot of transformation through that anxiety. And so I've seen too folks who've had that anxiety and that telling, right? That's a very visceral, real experience that can tell us something is out of alignment for them.
Yes.
And as that emotion physically works itself through the lower digestive tract and starts to actually become waste, we can rid our bodies of it through that very system. It is one of the largest parts of ourselves, right? And we often don't take we take it for granted for how much it has to tell us. Even when we put food inside of our mouths, which starts the digestive
Right.
process through taste. Taste is a really good indicator of sensation and fun and aliveness. And each of our taste buds have like different wisdom too for how we express that aliveness and that fun. And if something tastes sour or something that we used to enjoy tastes sour, that could be an indicator that something's out of alignment for us. There's something sour in our life. There's something that we need to address, right? That's,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
But it's so fascinating. What that makes me think about is back to the digestive system. Predominantly, to my awareness, it's women, whether it's
Mhm,
irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, celiacs, all these different conditions. And the idea that we either choose our body or we sort of get assigned to our body, either way, it's a choice.
mhm.
Do you have any insight or speculation into why women, whether it's autoimmune conditions, which are also predominantly suffered by women, or digestive issues with this idea around anxiety? What is your spiritual speculation or awareness into
Mm.
that?
Oh, I love this question because autoimmune disorders too are on the rise.
Yes, they are.
And so when we look at the environment that we're living in and all of the ways that we don't treat it well, because that is also part of us, right? It's no question that autoimmune disorders are on the rise because of the way that we treat our environment. So part of that past life and making a soul's choice is maybe past life, but also making the soul's choice to be a woman to come in with autoimmune is very much saying, I want to be here now because I know it's going to be challenging and I'm a helper. I'm a very much a helper energy. And the more anxious that we start to feel is like the more we're getting closer to that helper energy really manifesting itself, right? It can feel very, very scary to really open up into that and I say helper, but that can mean all sorts of things. That can mean a wisdom guide, a
Yes.
spiritual guide. That could be, anything from a nurse or like, it could be, it's very open ended. It just means it could be helping protect the environment. But women, right, in that feminine energy, which the feminine side of our body is our left side of the body. So it's funny, I just picked up my left hand. Um, it's like once you start to know it, it's like it's yeah. Um, so as women, when we choose to be women too, we're really choosing more, or if we happen to become a woman, we're really signing up for more challenges. We are souls that are here. We're ready to spread this message of love. We're ready to be here for the hard stuff. And we know it's not going to be easy. And I think if you look at how women, especially powerful women through history, have really shared their story, they've said that, right? They said like, I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and still here I am, right? And still here I am. And so
Mm.
I really encourage women, especially, to lean into that feminine side, to lean into that feminine power, especially right now, just with all this happening in like the astrology and planet alignments. It's a really great time to open up to some more of that feminine energy, get curious about it. And that would include like tuning in more to the left side of your body, noticing the sensations on that side. You could even play with it with some practices like writing with your left hand or taking a step. If you're right handed, we tend to always do everything right sided first, right? Um, Taking a step with our left foot first or doing something, right, to really awaken. If you have a dance move or something to really awaken that left side of our body, because that's going to uncover so much more wisdom as to what we need to do and uncover. An autoimmune disorder is the last thing I'll say about it too, is it's very, very specific to you and how you treat it for yourself. There's so many different paths to go down. And I would just encourage women to open up to that circulatory wisdom, to allow that space for inspiration and to find what works for you, and to really start to take that path in your own way and help, either through community or with a trusted friend or partner, like help build more of that ability to explore and advocate for yourself too, especially if you're like in a medical setting or, whatever you end up being in. And it's such a learning journey. Like it is such a more potent self discovery journey,
Mm.
and it's saying like, "I am ready to be here now in this time."
I have a question as I'm thinking of, um, one of the things that goes through all illnesses, that when we have any illness, whether it's an autoimmune or if there's something wrong with one of our organs, that there's so much anxiety, and there's so much anxiety just in our bodies. And is there any way to understand, or to look at our bodies and understand where the core is for that anxiety, if that makes sense? Like um, yeah, is that too wide?
Mhm. I don't think so. I think that's actually a really great practice, Bernadette, honestly. The core of your anxiety, I like the way that you labeled that. I think, um, yes, because that can be very different for so many people. It can show up almost every time for a lot of people in their stomachs, right? Because
Mhm.
that's just like that's that holding place, right? And it just wants to move things along. It just wants to move things through. It doesn't know what it's gonna get, right? It's very acidic, it can be spicy, right? It's like it doesn't know what it's gonna get, and it just wants to move things through, and it might move things through at a really quick, rapid pace because it's feeling that anxiety on either end, right? Um, and also, like, um, in some practices too, it is really, there is a time and a place, for, if we're ill and we need to like vomit or something to get well, right? And that's considered getting well instead of getting sick in some practices and some beliefs.
Mm.
And so, anyway, so a lot of people have it in the stomach, but some people might really carry it in their lungs. And, they tend to hold their breath. They tend to get smaller. They tend to get tighter. It could be in their shoulders. Like I'm
Mm.
feeling it right now, like in all sorts of places, just as I'm talking about it. So for you, it could just your core, the core of anxiety could just be that very first moment. Where is it going? Oh, it went here.
Mm.
It went into the shoulders, which hold responsibility, which hold
Mhm.
power,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so it that has something to tell you right there. Okay. I tend to, if this person were to say I tend to my core of anxiety is
Mhm.
here in the shoulders. There's something around the responsibility or power in their lives that they need to take a look at.
Yeah, I got frozen shoulder a couple of years ago, and it was in relationship, I believe, to I'm a caregiver for my mother who has Alzheimer's. And the burden of carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, it was like my body was like, "You can't do this, you can't do this," which leads me, and I realize we're running low on time, to the dynamic of inflammation, which gets such a bad rap, understandably, because it can cause such suffering and disease. But the inflammatory response, much like,
Mhm.
I am vomiting as a way of, you know, I don't know, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but it's a purge of choice rather than of being sick, right? It's a way of getting better. The inflammation is saying, pay attention. It's
Yes.
really pay attention. And so much I think what we do, at least in my life and in my practice with my clients, is the resistance. So Bernadette, I feel like your question was actually quite brilliant because at any given moment that anxiety can be sourced from any different place, and maybe historically it tends to reside in one place, which is saying pay attention to this place. And rather than trying to shut it down, what if we listen? What if we
Mhm.
ask what it is saying? What is the sensation from that place of neutrality, that it's not good or bad? Because again, even getting back to this idea of women and autoimmunity and that we choose these, and it's a very courageous, valiant path forward because we can easily be looked at as the canaries in the coal mine, which can feel sacrificial, but when in fact it's saying it's a wake-up call to bestow our wisdom and our strength,
Mm.
because it's the portal to wisdom and strength, even through pain.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. Um, Inflammation is such an indicator, as you shared, Kristen. And it and like anything in balance, right? Too much inflammation, it can
Mhm.
start to be a problem. But we don't ever want to do away with any of these things. I think what's really great about what you shared is like we don't all of these pieces of ourselves. The goal is not to get rid of or dampen, or the goal is to listen, right? And so this inflammatory process is an alert system that's telling us something is urgently, right, out of alignment for us.
Yes,
And we that's our moment to take it in and listen. I love
absolutely.
it.
So we are unfortunately at time. You have shared so many morsels of just the outer surface of the practice that you
Mhm.
live and the wisdom that you share. You've covered a lot of territory. Is there any final thought or thoughts that you'd like to leave people with as they perhaps begin to learn to honor their body and tune in to its
Mm,
message?
yeah. Just really doing so with curiosity and awe, right? And
Mm,
just starting with curiosity is in reverence and awe is really the way that we can start to work through that patience and start to listen and start to know and start to get more present to get here. and just being a little more curious and ask some questions. We are safe. We are loved. We are powerful. We are amazing listeners.
Mm.
And within us and through us, and however our body expresses, and whatever it is that we go through in the day to day, right? That we can always come back to that love because that is who
Yeah.
we truly are.
Yes. Yes. So good. How do people learn more about you if they want to work with you or learn more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can find me on intunewithmelinda.com or on Instagram at the same name. And yeah, I would love to learn more about who's out there.
Mhm.
And thank you again for having me on for a second time. This was such a lovely conversation. And I love your really well thought out questions and um, insight as well through this.
How I Made It Through is produced and distributed by EIQ Media, LLC. Elevate your emotional IQ with podcasts and content focused on overcoming adversity, leadership, mental health, entrepreneurship, spiritually transformative experiences, and more.